committee while we wait for the feed to start, and then you can commence.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to the special meeting of the Administrative Policies Committee. There's only one item on the agenda tonight. Before we get to the agenda, just a few words of introduction. Anyone that wishes to speak that is not on screen should use the raise hand function, as the clerk was just mentioning. It is beside your name under participants. You can view the participants by clicking at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It says participants. And then there's various buttons for video, audio, and raise hand. Raise hand is at the bottom of that participant screen if it's in a separate window, or if it's at the right of your screen, it is at the bottom of that as well. Yes, so I'm trying to configure my screen. There we go. So I see we have 5 members of the committee here, Councillor Hall, Councillor Bohm, Councillor McLaren, Councillor Chappelle, welcome. 4 are required for quorum. So if 2 members leave, we lose quorum. And I understand that a couple members are under time pressure. So we'll try to deal with the one item tonight if possible. Once the item is in our, once we've heard from the public and we've had our briefing, there are a number of delegations, there are people that wish to speak. If you're not here as a delegation, you may still speak. You still get 5 minutes, but it is in the public input section, which comes after the briefing. And I will invite members of the public to speak at that time. Again, you use your raise hand function if you wish to speak. The purpose of the recommendation is in the package, and the end result, if the committee passes something tonight, is that it goes to council and the decision lies with council. So whatever decision is made here at committee is on the recommendation to council only. It is not a final decision. The final decision rests with council. I understand there's been a lot of public input already. Staff will summarize some of this in the briefing, but the point is, the most important point of this meeting is to let anyone who wishes to speak from the public to have that opportunity. Those comments are recorded by the clerk. They form part of the public record, and that public record can be reviewed by any member of council prior to the council vote. So this is an excellent way to get your points known. You may also submit in writing to the clerks at any time until the council vote. So even after tonight's meeting, public comments are in order if you send them to the clerk. The clerk will mention how to do that later. So I've only got the one computer, so I'll have to toggle back and forth. So just bear with me while I pull up the agenda. There is an addendum, which we will deal with when we approve the agenda. So I'm calling the meeting to order. For the agenda, you'll notice the items. So there's on number 5, there's 3 delegations, I believe. There is a member of the committee that would wish to add another delegation. That's fine. As soon as we move the agenda, we can make changes to it. After that, we have a brief from the commissioner, and then we have our one item of business, which is a recommendation to council. So Need a mover and a seconder for the agenda. Moved by Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Holland. The agenda is on the floor. Would anyone wish to speak? Yeah, I did not see your hand, Councillor Chappelle. Yeah, there it is.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, moved by myself, Councillor Chappelle, and seconded by Councillor Bohm, that the Administrative Policies Committee waive Section 2.17 of the committee bylaw in order to permit Clerk Con to appear before the committee as a delegation, and that the agenda be reordered to permit Mr. Con to provide his delegation prior to Delegation A. So have him present first.
So motion from Councillor Chappelle, moved and seconded to add a delegation as the first delegation. Would anyone wish to speak to the motion? Councillor McLaren.
Why is he first? Why do you want him first?
Question to the mover, Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, I understand that Mr. Khan has a young family and has parental commitments, and this would be the earliest time would be suitable to help him with his family.
Thank you. Any other comments? We will vote on the alteration of the agenda. Mr. or Madam Clerk, I believe that requires 2/3 vote. Is that correct?
Actually, Mr. Chair, at the committee meetings, it's just a simple 50% plus one majority.
Okay, great. So 3 out of 5 is needed to pass anything tonight. So we'll call the vote on the change to the agenda. All those in favor? And that passes. So the agenda has an added delegation as number 1. Any other comments about the agenda? Councillor Chappelle.
I would like to move that that with respect to Mr. Ron Hartling, that he speak last.
Do you have a reason for this, Councillor Chappelle?
Just, yes, I do. Just in light of the presentations that will be coming forward, I think it'll just provide Mr. Hartling an opportunity to summarize his presentation in a clear and succinct fashion within the 5 minutes.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, is it permissible to ask the delegate who was at one point number 1 if he agrees to speak fourth?
Mr. Chair, I believe this is a political decision. The agenda is more or less presented to the committee in its final format. If the committee wishes to amend it, that would be a decision of the committee.
Okay. Any other comments on this second change to the agenda? Seeing none, I will call the question on moving.
Mr. Chair?
Yes?
You require a seconder, I believe.
Yes, is there a seconder for Councillor Chappelle's motion? Seconded by Councillor Bohm. Any other debate? Call the question on moving delegate number 2 to slot number 4 of the delegations. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor McLaren? Okay, so that motion loses. Any other proposed changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, you made reference to the addendum earlier, but I would just ask that you approve the agenda with the addendum when you get to that point.
Thank you for that reminder. Let me pull that up so I know what I'm referring to. 1 second. So published today, there was an addendum correspondence received from Jonathan Drake dated November 19th regarding short-term rental licensing program. That is a letter. It is in the addendum and you may read it. I have not seen this, so I'm going to quickly scan over this. I'll give the committee a couple minutes to read that item of correspondence. It is under the addendum on the on the page, on the main page. Okay, I've read the submission, and would anyone need more time? Okay, so now we go back to the agenda. Bear with me, pull that up again. So that would be the correspondence is in order. So we just will approve the agenda with the amendment and with the addition of the addendum. It's already been moved and seconded. Is there any comment? All those in favor of the amended and addended agenda? All those opposed? So we had 3 votes in favor of the amended agenda, so it passes. So we have an agenda. First item of the agenda is the confirmation of minutes. There are no minutes because this is a special meeting, so there is a history, but there are no minutes to confirm at this time. Before we speak to the item at some point, either before or after the briefing, I am going to ask the clerk to give us a chronology of what this item had, its course so far to council and to committee, so that we're aware of where it sits in the procedural rules. Next is disclosure of pecuniary interest from members of the committee. Seeing none, we get to 5 delegations. So the first delegation was the one added by Councillor Chappelle, I believe it was Mr. Khan. Each delegation has 5 minutes, and then questions from committee members only are in order. 2 per member.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Coming through loud and clear. Apologize, it's my first Zoom meeting, so I'm pretty excited. Just let me see if I can make this thing work. All right. Well, firstly, I would like to thank you so much for accommodating me. I know it was a late addition, and I very much appreciate being added. So good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. It's really wonderful to be able to contribute and be part of this process to help shape our city and really help it become better. I'd also like to recognize the city staff for their work, the meeting they had with us, and generating these recommendations. I really want to believe that they did it for the benefit of the city and the people that live here. However, after having read the recommendations, I feel that assumption was challenged, and I was really saddened by that. Like, they don't hate us. How could they? They're professional, unbiased, and have the good of the city and its residents in mind in all they do. I firmly believe that. But how could they think so poorly of us? Perhaps it's really because they don't know us, who we are, what we strive to do, which is possible since we've spent such little time together. Could I have the next slide? Thank you. So I'm sure we've all heard about the confirmation bias. It's that we've already made up our minds and look for ways to justify it. It can be subconscious, and unless we're vividly aware of ourselves, it's difficult to overcome this. I struggle with it myself regularly, and I'm thinking that this may have happened here. I thought I'd use this time to try and dispel some of the myths and that have arisen and show that the impact that these recommendations can have on us and how they motivate us as citizens and voters. The next slide, please. So to be blunt, these recommendations assume we're criminals, that we're a bunch of grifters and deviants that will stoop to any low to buck the system and score a few more dollars that are at the expense of our fellow residents. And to me, that sounds pretty grim, eh? Well, it's hard to believe that that picture was in the minds of those that constructed these recommendations. But that is how we all felt as we read it. All 100 plus of us, and all of our friends and families that we confided in, and the business owners that we recommend to our guests. They were all quite appalled at the intent and implications made in these recommendations. Next slide, please. So last year, even before COVID hit, our livelihoods and small businesses were threatened with annihilation out of the blue. To try and understand, we scrambled and came together as a group and a very clear picture of mood of the type of people and persons that would embark on this way of contributing to Kingston. To my mind, there was hardly a criminal among us. So who are we then? Well, we're your neighbors and your friends, and to many that come here, the public face of Kingston. Most of us are mature, gentle, kind, considerate, and compassionate, respectful residents that view ourselves as ambassadors. We want to make Kingston an anticipated getaway or a regular meeting spot for old friends, or an affordable family stay where everyone can be together in one place. We work very hard and to offer a unique and tailored experience that inherently is different from that of a hotel. The guest that stays with us would not be the same guest that stays at, say, the Frontenac Club. It's a completely different experience. As hosts, we go to great lengths to establish and create these enduring connections. And we have guests that continue to return year after year to enjoy the familiarity and warmth that they receive from what many of my guests have called their home in Kingston. The fact that some of our guests just wouldn't have even come here had the option not been available. They would have pressed on until they reached their destinations in Ottawa or Toronto or Montreal, instead of stopping along the way to rest and end up discovering the gem that we all know as Kingston. We are a group that loves this city and have embarked on a small business that is centered on that. There's no glamour here. We don't get a fat pension from it or have a generous benefits package or even a vacation. We live by the last review we've had and the goodwill and reputation that we have taken years to develop. We spend our time and invest our money in making our places as beautiful and comfortable and as welcoming as we can for others. And that should be celebrated, not penalized, we feel. The next slide, please. So when the pandemic hit and our inherently unstable situation meant our incomes evaporated as the cancellations piled up. And contrary to what was said in the staff report, there was no windfall of cash from Airbnb to compensate us. And how can I say this gently? You should all know that we found that opinion of the Commissioner of Community Service intensely insulting. And if I were in your shoes, I would certainly be upset by it if my staff had offended my constituents in that manner. It's especially hurtful coming from those whose incomes were unaffected, largely due to the taxes that we had to continue to pay on our properties, even as our resources to pay it dried up.
1 minute.
Next slide, please. If it was factual, and it would reveal that hardly anyone received anything from Airbnb, that there was a relief fund, but the host to receive anything, for the host to receive anything, the strictest of cancellation policies had to be in place. One that no one would choose that would deter most people from booking in the first place. Next slide, please. So it's all too easy to apply that confirmation bias I mentioned to you before. We have all heard stories of other places where crazy parties and human trafficking or dark streets are around every corner, but this is Kingston, and all the dark imaginings listed in the report are fictitious. They're not based on actual happenings here, but what has taken place at urban centers that attract a different kind of guest. To assume that this is the case here seems devious and nefarious, as if we're being deliberately mischaracterized and discredited to you all. There are some valid criticisms, but no host would deny them. And if they had existed, we should root them out and apply the full extent of our punitive measures to them, which would be easy since they already exist. We don't need any new oppressive draconian bylaws to do nothing but fuel the ill will and harm the city in the end. The spirit
Thank you,
of this.
Mr. Khan. That is 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Questions from members of the committee? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the presentation very much has a theme of feeling targeted or unjustly sort of penalized financially and through regulation, coming from the staff report. So I would ask you to elaborate on that and provide perhaps your perspective on taxation and regulation of other businesses, whether they be in the city of Kingston or wherever else. And simply put, I guess, is it that you're opposed to any kind of regulation or taxation of business? Or is it that you feel that somehow through Airbnb, which is a multinational corporation, that local residents are being targeted by regulation despite what's happening in other jurisdictions?
Thank you, Councillor Holland. I'm sorry I wasn't able to finish my presentation, and I did address that. Sorry, I was a little nervous, but you're right. We're not absolutely not opposed to any regulation or a tax on us. Actually, we voluntarily and will willingly pay that. That is not the issue at all here. We want to contribute to our city in any way that we can. We love it here, and we want to make it a better place and attract way more people. And we feel that we can do that in a way that diversifies the type of accommodation that is here. What we object to is being singled out and targeted in ways that are different than the other accommodations present in Kingston that we have, and have what we consider a oppressive and big brother type of situation that is going to monitor us and track us and dox us and violate our privacy. This is what we object to. And the staff report to us seemed to center on that we are these people that are going to try and circumvent the laws and try and get fly under the radar and take whatever we can, when that is absolutely the furthest from the truth. We want to pay, we want to contribute, but we have a system in place that will do this for free. Airbnb, as you mentioned, is a huge corporation, so their resources are very vast. And one of them is to integrate with cities like they've done in Mississauga and other places to submit our taxes to you directly, which we want. And it actually will help us, as you know, we're small business owners. There's a lot to do. This takes a whole step away from us. If it wasn't something that we had to do ourselves to, you know, collect this money, like firstly, we don't even have to interact with guests in the monetary sense. That all goes through Airbnb. We actually don't ever see any of the money directly from the guest. It's against their policies. It goes to Airbnb, and then Airbnb distributes it to us afterwards. And it would be absolutely easy to just take that 4% and send it to the city. And for the small amount of people, and I hear that, you know, like maybe there will be people, I don't know them, and none of the people that I've interacted with would ever want to circumvent this. But if there were those people that say aren't on the Airbnb platform, we could make something easily available to them. It doesn't have to be this way, is what I'm saying. The assumption is that we are going to try and get around it instead of giving us the opportunity to contribute to these things voluntarily and then assessing maybe later on. Does that answer your
Thank
question?
you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Councillor Chappelle.
Through your chair, I understand you said Saga is one of the communities. Are you aware of other communities nearby or similar size to Kingston that may actually offer Airbnb offering this service? I did read once that the whole province of Quebec, Saskatchewan, and BC use Airbnb for their collection of the mat tax. But do you know of any neighboring communities that might also provide this service through Airbnb?
The only one that I can think of, Councillor Chappelle, is Brockville, I believe. I have not really verified, for me, it's hearsay. I've heard of these things, but in order to actually have those confirmations, I'd be hesitant to say that these particular ones did. I have heard the places that you've mentioned. Mississauga, because I'm from there originally, is one of the ones that I kind of follow, so I knew that. But in the vicinity, I'm thinking Brockville, but maybe we could ask another home share host. I think Ron might be able to speak to that.
I do know that a city that they use to compare quite frequently with the city of Kingston is Sudbury, and Sudbury does have the same service through Airbnb.
Oh,
so thank you for your question or your comment.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Thank you, Mr. Khan. We'll move on to the next delegation. Mr. Hartling, Ron Hartling will speak to us regarding this item. Again, I remind the delegates, you have 5 minutes. I will give you a 1-minute warning. Mr. Hartling, are you there?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, you could go right to the first slide. Thank you. Thank you, councillors, for this speaking opportunity. I doubt your busy schedules afford many of you time to pour through the 99-page brick in front of you, one which I consider remarkably unprofessional because it lacks any of the critical elements you would need for informed decision-making. There's no clearly defined Kingston problem, no evidence of any overriding need for the recommended measures, which would hurt many of your already struggling constituents' livelihoods, no analysis comparing the real costs of those measures with the claimed benefits, let alone less disruptive options. Absent those elements, the recommendations are little more than the opinions and agenda of the commissioner. This report would impose an expensive licensing regime on all STR hosts for no stated purpose beyond providing her department with unspecified, quote, additional tools for nuisance-related impacts already covered by existing bylaws. The report claims to align with the city's theme goal of increasing housing affordability, to which none of its recommendations are actually relevant. This is actually a little out of sequence. Yes, this is it. The many references to having consulted with home share hosts are misleading. This summarizes what actually happened. In 9 months, we had less than 8 hours of interactions with the bylaw team. Only the August 6th meeting included real consultation. During the final 30 minutes, the manager of licensing enforcement showed he had been listening and shared preliminary ideas based on our input, which might have led to an agreed solution. He cautioned that he had to consult with his superiors before engaging with our negotiating team. Given the prolonged silence which followed, there was obviously no appetite for negotiations. Next slide, please. As evidenced by this reply to one of my follow-up attempts, they were closed to follow further input. I therefore submit that this committee's direction to consult was not adequately discharged. Staff unwillingness to explore mutually acceptable solutions leaves impacted residents with no alternative but to escalate our concerns to councillors, which is highly disrespectful of your time. Community services, and you could start the next series of slides. Community services appear to define consultation as merely listening to submissions from impacted residents, which they can then ignore behind closed doors. There's zero opportunity for critical review of the evidence, for exploring potentially more effective, less harmful alternatives, and for negotiating the details, which are hidden from us until 6 days before council. Suboptimal recommendations are inevitable, in part because the process fails to benefit from deep subject matter expertise of those being regulated. The bylaw proposal extends enforcement authority to agents of the city. That means employees of private corporations would have the right to enter my principal residence uninvited. I, for one, would refuse to participate simply by changing our minimum stay to 31 days, thereby no longer being an STR host. We reject the imposition of private sector surveillance. Switching to a Canadian firm doesn't help because they're frequently bought out by US competitors. Next slide. How is
1
Kingston?
minute, Mr. Hartling.
Okay. I'm going to have to skip ahead then. Let's go to the final slide. You're probably as tired as us of this year-long ordeal, which has yet to produce any recommendations with benefits that exceed costs. Decades in senior roles at the federal level taught me that it's often easier and more effective to terminate a problematic project, replacing it with a better framed fresh start. This is one of those times. As one of your fellow councillors aptly put it, bad regulation is worse than no regulation. Rather than imposing expensive, disruptive, intrusive compliance on Kingston's already struggling STR hosts and then evaluating in a year, why not turn that around? In lieu of accepting this deeply flawed report, directs staff to prepare a simple bylaw requiring hosts to inexpensively register with the city and to display registration numbers in their listings, thereby facilitating compliance tracking. Proceed to add STRs to the MAT bylaw, but tweak the words so that it actually applies to Airbnb hosts. Direct staff to pursue a MAT collection agreement with Airbnb that would cover most hosts and use self-remittance on the city website for the remaining 15%. That will get us through the pandemic, after which an objective assessment would determine if it sufficed. By taking the simpler route, you'll immediately free yourselves and us from this painful, time-consuming process while earning our gratitude, not to mention our votes in the next election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartling. Well done in finishing under time. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Chappelle.
Sorry, I'm looking at two screens. I couldn't find the camera. My hand wasn't showing up. Through Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask Mr. Hartling, can you elaborate on why the Harmari approach is incompatible with the Airbnb host business model?
Yeah, because we basically don't collect money from our guests. The whole system is set up so that to prevent us from doing so. Guests pay Airbnb. No money comes to us. So we don't collect money that could be used to pay the MAT. It makes far more sense to have Airbnb, who are the collectors of the money, to pay the city directly, and at no cost. You know, that covers 85% of the problem. What I recommend is for the other 15% to use self-remittance on a city website. The worry that somehow Airbnb hosts, that would move from Airbnb to evade the tax simply doesn't wash. They don't pay the tax. Guests do, and no host in their right mind would switch from Airbnb to another service with the MAT collection in place, because they would then have to pay the accountants and the bookkeepers to keep those records for them. Airbnb just makes it easy, so we can focus our attention on delighting our guests, not on doing unnecessary administrivia.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Yes, Councillor Chappelle, you can have a second question. Yeah.
Okay. I was at a meeting pre-COVID with yourself and many other members at the office on John Counter Boulevard with Councillor Ussoff, and I think another Councillor Doherty was also there. And at that time, we expressed concern that we didn't feel as councillors that your group was consulted sufficiently to address the concerns over the doxing previously. So can you elaborate? Like, I looked at the schedule you provided. I also asked that question of staff, and 8 hours is not a lot. So can you elaborate on how the city could do a better job at the consultation more effectively?
Well, I think that you didn't get the consultation that you asked. This committee didn't get the kind of real consultation that they directed staff to provide. I've already described how it unfolded. I think that in future, if you really want real consultation in the future, it would be wise to add a word like a stronger term like negotiation, because what we envision is we sit down with staff, look at the evidence they have to substantiate the things that they're proposing to do, perhaps show flaws, like the obvious fact that this is a great example that hosts don't collect money and never have. So we can point out those flaws early on. We can negotiate solutions for them. We can bring expertise to the table that they don't have because they really don't understand our business. And I find it actually strange to be saying this, because this is taken for granted everywhere else that in negotiations. I had passed on to staff, and I don't think there was any interest, the Federal Treasury Board guidelines for consultation that are mandatory for all federal departments and agencies and crown corporations, that really clearly set out how, who has status to be consulted, how to consult, the back and forth. This is nothing like this. This is very amateur in comparison, and I think the city could benefit by taking a look at the approaches that are used and the best practices elsewhere, and really establish some proper guidelines for this, so that nobody else goes through this process in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Bohm, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I guess I have two quick questions there. One would be, has anybody, Mr. Hartling, from your group actually been successful in reaching out to Airbnb and seeing if they may be willing or capable of just removing the tax automatically, and what fast track for Kingston would look like if that's a possibility? And I guess my other concern was, I've heard some other concerns about how consultations happen during COVID, because it definitely does have its challenges. And some of the other things that I've also heard is that even the data being collected during the consultation due to COVID is suspect as well, because you're not getting a true of what things could be like. So trying to bring a policy in at a time where you have kind of some pre-COVID data and some after or some during COVID data, when we have no idea what after COVID is actually going to look like, also has challenges. So could you just provide some thought on those?
Right. On the latter, that's why I'm suggesting taking a really simple approach that can be done immediately and evaluated after COVID. But in answer to the beginning of your question, yes, I have been in touch with Airbnb. There was a gap during the summer that our Airbnb rep, Airbnb downsized severely because their revenues plummeted with the pandemic. So the Airbnb rep was amongst those who wasn't kept on. And she kind of disappeared suddenly before we realized that she was gone. But yes, the process is very simple. Airbnb has to meet some stringent, is required to meet some stringent privacy requirements. So they start the process as soon as a city approaches them or a municipality approaches them with a bylaw that requires MAT STRs collect the MAT. Okay, they send that to their legal department to ensure that the bylaw doesn't force them to violate the privacy requirements, and then they turn it over to the programmers to, Ontario is more complicated because it's it's a lot of work to program boundaries. Whereas most jurisdictions, it's done at the state or provincial level, and it's dead easy. So they require about 90 days to do that. I am in touch with the new Airbnb rep, and they actually were intending to try to reach Mr. Compo next week to touch base.
Thank you for that. So essentially, it is possible, but there were some hiccups just because of COVID and they affected Airbnb as well. It seems.
That's right. The basically the MAT could be in place and being collected faster than the current timeline. If
And at no cost to the city for that process, correct?
And at no cost to the city.
Okay.
And at no cost to hosts, because it's done automatically for us, which is what we want.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee that have not already asked your questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Hartling. And we'll move on to the next delegation. Next up is Beth Potter, President and CEO, Tourism Industry Association of Ontario. And like all delegates, you have 5 minutes. Are you there, Ms. Potter?
I am here. Thank you very much for having me this evening. Just to start, an introduction, my name is Beth Potter. I'm the President and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Ontario. TIO is the umbrella trade association representing all sectors of the tourism industry. Our main mandate is to be the voice of tourism and hospitality businesses to government at all levels, to work with government on policy, legislation, and regulations that make it easier to do business in the province, and one that will lead to economic growth and job growth. I'd like to give you some context on the size and scope of our industry. Prior to COVID-19, tourism receipts contributed $36 billion to the provincial GDP through 200,000 businesses and supported more than 400,000 jobs. The industry also contributed to the tax revenue at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels to the tune of $12 billion combined. Here in Kingston, tourism supports more than 7,000 jobs through 574 businesses. Now, prior to 2017, many destinations, including Kingston, funded their tourism marketing efforts by collecting a destination marketing fee, or a DMF. This industry-led initiative allowed the accommodation sector to voluntarily work hand in hand with the destination to design and implement strategies and campaigns to grow visitation and visitor spend. In the 2017 provincial budget, the government of the day introduced the Transient Accommodation Tax Act, giving municipalities the ability to leverage and collect tax on accommodations. This new tax that would come to be known as the Municipal Accommodation Tax effectively replaced the DMF. Because of this, the provincial government allowed for the collection of MAT to be shared with the tourism industry so that the economic growth of the sector and of the local community could continue. Within the Act, municipalities are able to determine the types of short-term accommodation that the tax would apply to. The tax can only apply to accommodation that is short-term in nature, i.e. stays of less than 30 days. One stipulation included the fact that where an MAT is implemented, all accommodators that meet the local definition of accommodation must collect and remit the MAT. Unfortunately, at the time of implementation, many municipalities did not have an infrastructure in place that would allow for the easy inclusion of independent short-term rentals like those offered across several platforms, including Airbnb, vacation rental by owner, and the various cottage rental programs that are existing in our province. This created an unlevel playing field. It also caused problems in jurisdictions across the province as they tried to create collection and audit processes across multiple platforms. The platforms themselves, and by those I mean the Airbnb, vacation rental by owners et al., have been resistant into entering into dozens, if not hundreds, of individual agreements across the province. Because this was not legislated as a provincial tax and rather as a municipal tax, and we all know there are 444 municipalities in the province, and each municipality has the ability to implement the MAT as each municipality have tourism businesses. So it's been a real challenge, but certainly other municipalities and other jurisdictions across the province are coming to resolutions and how to amend this. And I congratulate you on finding a system that would cross platforms and make it easy and simple to not only collect and audit, but also to engage the short-term rental accommodators, the independent ones, with the rest of the industry. So it's my understanding that tonight you're making a decision around a recommendation on if and how to collect the MAT from these types of accommodators. I encourage you to go forward positively with this decision. The short-term rental market, regardless of ownership type, has always been at the heart of the tourism economy. And while people don't travel to stay in temporary accommodations, they don't travel just to stay in a hotel room. It is a must if they've traveled from far from home. So by treating all accommodators with the same courtesy, with the same respect, and with the same business practices, it will also help to unite the industry, especially at a time when we are working on rebuilding and renewing our tourism experiences.
30 seconds.
You have a big decision ahead of you. I thank you very much for your time and your attention this evening.
Thank you. Questions from members of the committee? I have a question. Ms. Potter, you know the industry well. If the municipality does not make a decision that enables the city to collect the MAT from these hosts, the way that we are collecting from the hotels and motels and other licensed providers, is this a sustainable situation, or is it something that at some point the decision needs to be made? In other words, until the municipality decides what to do on this, where does that leave the industry?
Well, I think that you've got a really good example in Kingston through the Kingston Accommodation Partners of how an infrastructure can work at the local level if you choose not to use a platform like Amari. But it would require a piece of infrastructure that would allow you to catalog and identify and collect. You'd have to enter into individual agreements with each of the hosts, either on the ground, or you'd have to try and get individual agreements with the platforms if you want to get them to pay directly. What we're seeing in other jurisdictions is that the platforms themselves, the software companies themselves that are supplying the service, do not want to enter into hundreds of agreements across one province. They don't see the investment to be, they don't see the return on the investment that they would have to make. And if I can just add one more thing, and that is that, again, you know, the tourism industry it has many players. You know, it's attractions, it's hotels, it's restaurants, it's events, it's tours, and none of them can work without the other. And so the short-term rental market owned by independent homeowners has certainly become a part of the industry. And it would be great to see them at the table working collaboratively with the rest of the industry.
My second question would be the benefits of the MAT that is already being collected from the other part of the industry. Do the individual hosts that would be subject to this licensing initiative, do they benefit from the marketing that the city does through its agencies for destination marketing? Do they benefit from that? Does it help them with bookings in your estimation?
I would suggest that right now it doesn't, but that it could and it should. If they are collecting an MAT and contributing to the marketing budgets for the destination, then they should be involved. It could mean that they actually see, you know, if they're participating in the marketing campaigns, that they would see their business increase, that they would see their bookings increase. If right now the city of Visit Kingston goes out and tries to get a conference to come to the city as an example, the accommodations that would be listed would be those that are contributing to the MAT. If Airbnb owners and vacation rental by owner owners are not contributing to the MAT, then they don't have access to that market, And so I do believe that it can be beneficial to them all in the long run.
Thank you. Councillor Baum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, throughout this, I think I've understood a common theme, which is not that Airbnb or hosts like that don't want to pay the tax. It's more about how are they going to pay it. So would you agree that that's more at the issue? I've never heard one so far in my knowledge, in my experience, say they're against paying the tax. It's always been about the representation, the consultation, and how they go about paying that tax. And I believe earlier, one of the comments was being part of this. And I feel like based on what we've heard from some of them, is that if we go ahead with this, they're not going to feel like they were part of this. So do you have any comments about the concern that's been raised with that? Is maybe this is something that we need to take a bit more time on. I know it's already been a while, but if it's going to be a policy that and it's going to be good, the whole idea is to make sure that everybody feels like they've gotten something out of it and it does what it's intended to do, instead of creating a group of people which are totally resistant and are going to try to fight it as much as possible or be bitter about it, and then that hurts the entire city or the tourism sector overall by creating bad blood that doesn't need to be there.
Right. I absolutely agree that that they do need to feel that they're part of the decision-making process. That is the only way really to win friends in a situation like this. And if they haven't, then yes, go back and look at your consultation process. I was really just coming tonight to lend my support to the fact that they should be included in the MAT, the fact that they need a simple process. They are small business owners.
Exactly.
They don't need extra burden. So if there's any way that you can devise a system that helps ease the burden on them, then that's the system that you should be looking at. From what I've read and from what I've seen in other jurisdictions, the proposed solution, the proposed platform, to me looks like a good one, simply because it is one system that covers all of the various rental platforms. I haven't seen another system in other jurisdictions in the province that does that. So you'd be ahead of the curve.
Any other questions for Ms. Potter? Councillor Chappelle.
Your chair. My question is really related to as a representative of all of Ontario, we know that Windsor, Sudbury, Brockville, Mississauga all use Airbnb to collect the MAT tax. Are you getting similar support for other STRs in those communities, or is it pretty much the bulk of those communities are using Airbnb, and has it been a positive or negative experience for supporting the tourism industry?
Airbnb has become, the brand name that represents all short-term rentals, and people often forget that there are others. And so the bulk of the inventory right now is certainly rests with Airbnb, and so they've been able to in densely populated areas where they've had a high volume of inventory. They've been able to negotiate with Airbnb agreements that work. And I don't know what your negotiations or what your conversations with Airbnb have been like, but I do know that in a lot of smaller municipalities and less densely populated by accommodators, not by population, but by accommodators, Airbnb has been, and the other platforms have been reluctant to enter into multiple agreements or smaller agreements. There needs to be, they're a business as well. They need to see the return on their investment as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Potter. And we'll go on to the next delegation. Mr. Sean Billing, the operating partner of Frontenac Club, downtown Kingston, will speak to the same item. Mr. Billing, you also have 5 minutes. Are you there?
I am, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to address both my fellow operators and the members of council. I am a small independent operator. I have a very small operation in town. I appreciate Mr. Khan referencing it. Any marketing you can do for me, Mr. Khan, is appreciated. I've been in the market for 4 years, working collaboratively with both CAP and Tourism Kingston. And I guess to start with, I believe a variety of accommodations is critical to a healthy marketplace. And I as a small operator, understand the burden that is often felt by owner operators in terms of making things successful. More importantly, though, and more critically, I think, the opportunity to participate is unique in Kingston. I would suggest to you that the opportunities that the smaller independent hotels have been given in this marketplace far outweigh the investment that we have to make personally and professionally. We are unique in this marketplace. We do provide services that are different than other accommodators, not better, not worse, just different. And as Mr. Hartling said wisely, this is bringing people to town that might not otherwise have come to town. And his product certainly does that. Mr. Khan's product does it, and others do it. It's vital that we have that mix of accommodations. It's vital that all of those accommodators have the opportunity to participate in the success of this marketplace. It is what makes it strong. And so I'm not here to argue about process or anything. I'm here to suggest to you that my experience as a small operator has been enriched by the fact that I have the opportunity to work with CAP and Visit Kingston and other arms of the city as well collaboratively, that I have a voice at the table as a small operator, and that I've been able to, in my own small way, influence the success in this marketplace. This is a very tough time for all of us, and I understand the concerns that my fellow small operators have. I'm very worried about what the next 6 months look like, and beyond that, I'm very worried about what the next 2 years look like. We need, as small operators, we need the support of larger bodies in order to help strengthen this marketplace. And we need to have a voice at the table. And I think this is an opportunity. As I say, I won't speak to process, but I can speak to the opportunity that's presented to smaller accommodators to have their voice heard and have investment made on their part, in particular around advocacy, expertise, and marketing. And so I would encourage the operators to think very long and hard about what kind of a real investment this is. I collected the DMF. I continue to collect the MAT. I do not have an accounting firm working for me. I do not have night auditors. I do all of the accounting myself, and it takes me approximately 10 minutes at the end of every month to submit my remittance. I understand that the operators, the short-term accommodators who work with the various organizations don't have access to the cash, but you have access to understand what you're about to collect. And you certainly, I think, can understand how critical it would be to have those monies magnified or amplified by contributing them to a larger pot. So I would just, as Councillor Bohm, I believe, said, he hasn't heard anybody objecting to contributing. And that's fantastic that no one has objected. And I would encourage everybody around the table, and I'm willing to help as well, to figure out how we can arrive at a way to get the short-term accommodators that we're speaking to at the table, and how we can get them participating, because we're a better marketplace with them at the table. We're a better, more diversified marketplace that will attract more guests and tourists to this destination. And that ultimately should be our goal, that high tide floating all boats. So I would encourage everyone to stay focused on how do we get to yes here, because I think yes is the only answer to strengthen tourism in Kingston. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Billing. Questions from members of the committee? Well, I guess must have covered all the bases. No one seems to have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Billing. Next up on the agenda is the briefing.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I believe Councillor Holland has a question.
I can't see Councillor Holland.
Yeah, sorry, I got in there late. I was just curious because Mr. Billing referenced the benefits of the MAD and the destination marketing, and I just was wanted to ask if you could elaborate on that just a little bit.
Well, thank you for your question. the opportunity, I'm not sure that we're all necessarily aware of it. Things come through our inboxes quite regularly, but both CAP and Visit Kingston have been consistently recognized by third parties, provincially, nationally, even globally, for the quality of the marketing campaigns. Kingston bats above its weight when it comes to tourism and accommodation. Now, we're blessed to have great natural accommodation, great historical attraction, to have a variety of accommodation, to be, in a natural transportation hub. We're between great marketplaces. But we also do a lot more with a lot less than a lot of other organizations do. And I think it is the strength of the partnerships, and we would only be strengthened by bringing the STAs together. So I look at marketing, I look at advocacy. The fact that Beth Potter, who is a very senior person in tourism, who I've known for a number of years, would take time to speak to Kingston, speaks to how important Kingston is as a destination within the province, and how important it is to get all the players on site. I think Beth's final message should be one that should ring in everyone's ears, which is, what's really vitally important is to get the STAs to the table here, and for their own success, but also for the strength of the destination.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren, did you also have a question? No. Okay. Well, then we'll move on to the briefing. Thank you, Mr. Billing.
Pleasure.
We are under time constraint, and this item has been with the committee for some time now. It did begin council, and maybe that will be part of the briefing, but there are a number of options available to us, but eventually we do have to recommend something to council.
Thank you, and through you, your chair. My name is Kyle Campo. I'm the manager of licensing and enforcement. I will be presenting tonight along with my colleagues. On November 8th, 2018, council passed a motion to direct staff to recommend a short-term rental licensing program, a short-term rental licensing bylaw, and to report back with amendments with the MAT bylaw to include short-term rentals. Staff are before the committee tonight to present a supplemental report on the short-term rental licensing program. On February 13th, the committee deferred report number AP 20-011 to April 9th, 2020. That was further deferred due to the pandemic and moved to tonight's agenda. Tonight's discussions will begin with a small PowerPoint presentation that will provide further insight to the changes of the draft bylaw and a recommendation to report back to council in 1 year's time for review. Next slide, please. The bylaw presented to council in December 2019 contained restrictions on short-term rentals that have been removed after further public engagement. STR restrictions removed from the bylaw are limiting STR operations to 180 days per calendar year and restricting STRs to principal residences. Based on multiple discussions that happened since February's meeting, primarily through the concerns that were presented by Kingston Home Share Association, staff reviewed and amended changes based on the feedback that the program was too restrictive to host. Next slide, please. Staff are recommending that a bylaw be passed implementing a licensing program for STR accommodations in Kingston. STR properties would be regulated in certain situations. No more than 3 rooms rented individually, sleeping accommodation for a maximum 4 individuals, and the above restrictions would not apply to STRs that consist of an entire single detached unit rental under a single booking. So if you're going to rent out your entire dwelling, the above 2 restrictions would not apply. Short-term rental operators would be required to obtain an annual license with a fee of $180 per year. Next slide, please. To ensure compliance with this bylaw, staff are recommending entering into a 1-year contract with LTAS Technologies for the Harmari platform. Use of Harmari is key to ensuring compliance with the bylaw, as it will complement staff investigative techniques and procedures. LTAS Technologies is a Canadian company, and the data they store and collect is strictly in Canada. Harmari platform will be utilized for collection of the municipal accommodation tax as well. Next slide, please. Staff are recommending that the municipal accommodation tax bylaw be amended to include STR accommodations. STR operators would be required to charge a 4% tax on all stays. The City of Kingston Financial Services Department would be responsible for collection of MAT from operators through the Harmari platform. The MAT would be self-remitted by STR operators using the online portal. Next slide, please. Staff are recommending that the administrative monetary penalties bylaw be amended to include offenses related to non-compliance of the STR licensing bylaw. Fines would range between $100 to $200 for a variety of offenses. AMPs are viewed by staff as a key to enforcement of the bylaw and are less punitive than a court-based enforcement approach. For persistent non-compliant, staff can pursue charges as provided by the Municipal Act. Next slide, please. Staff are recommending the bylaw come into force and effect June 1st, 2021. This will allow time for STR operators to become familiar with the licensing program. This will also allow staff time to implement an education and awareness campaign for licensing requirements. Next slide, please. Staff are recommending that within 1 year of implementation of the bylaw and prior to the renewal of any agreements with LTAS, the committee receive a report containing the following: the number of different STR providers and the number of units, the total dollar amount of MAT collected and by provider type, details regarding any enforcement and methods used to enforce the bylaw, administrative costs related to the implementation, and potential amendments to the bylaw if necessary. That is the conclusion of the report, I believe, or of the presentation. I'd also like to note that I am accompanied with my colleagues tonight with representation also from Harmari that can further elaborate on the MAT tax collection portal and the self-remittance process. And that would conclude, and we can take any further questions.
Can't hear me. So questions from members of the committee are in order. Questions only, not debate, to staff about the briefing or the report. Who would, does anyone have any questions for staff? So in a staff briefing, it's only members of the committee that have the ability to interact. Seeing none, we'll move on to the item of business in question. Oh, Councillor Chappelle, you do have a question. I'm having a hard time seeing your hand, Councillor Chappelle.
Trying this new system of looking at two monitors because it's very difficult. So through your chair, I do have a couple questions. I'm glad that the proposal is a Canadian-based company. That was a significant issue the last time. I don't understand with respect to the consultation process. I expressed this as a very significant concern back in February. I've harped about it a number of times, and I don't believe that the representatives tonight that were speaking had their concerns addressed. I don't understand why we cannot pursue an Airbnb solution for a stopgap measure, get people involved, registered, encourage them to use that particular platform, and then work on a solution for the balance of 15% or whatever that number is. I'm very concerned. So I'd like to know.
Sorry, you need to ask your question.
So my question is, why wouldn't you pursue an opportunity to work with Airbnb to get the bulk of these residents hooked up with that system?
Question to staff about Airbnb.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair.
This is for Kyle. This is for Kyle. He's a lead on this. That's why I was asking the question to.
Yeah, Councillor, it doesn't matter which member of staff answers the question. They're all aware of the details.
I'd be happy to start, and Mr. Compo can add any details if he feels that I've missed anything in my response. So related to the Airbnb platform, there are a few concerns that came up with why staff are not recommending entering into an agreement with Airbnb at this time for mat collection. One of the key pieces in some of our collaboration with other municipalities that are currently using the Airbnb platform is that the process of reconciliation and the reports that are provided relative to the mat collection are at a very high level, which has created challenges in other communities with respect to being able to reconcile by the operator and to know who is paid and who hasn't paid. So in looking at this in terms of the collection and working with our taxation department and part of the MAT bylaw, which stipulates that there's auditing involved related to the current process for operators, we didn't feel confident that we'd be able to carry out the same level of process that exists right now with respect to MAT collection with STR operators based on the information that would be available through a report from Airbnb. They don't provide any information related to the specific operator. They're providing quarterly checks or checks that are in the total amount of what's being collected, but not able to provide the information that would give us the ability to audit down on an operator by operator level. One of the other considerations as well, although Airbnb is a major platform in our market, there are at least 4 other platforms that are operating. And we do have operators that are working between different platforms. So we needed to find a system that would enable us to collect from STR operators, regardless of which professional platform they're choosing to host their unit. Mr. Compo, if you wanted to add anything in addition, I'll mute.
Thank you, Ms. Agnew. Go ahead, Mr. Compo.
Thank you, Commissioner Agnew. I also wanted to add on to that. Through our communications with Airbnb, their correspondence with us is that they will not look at Kingston as a municipality to work with us until the bylaw is finalized. So what we've been told is that there is a minimum 90-day time frame until this agreement can be in place. So what it is called is a voluntary collection agreement. And what we have been told is that council needs to pass the bylaw before Airbnb will even look at this. On top of the fact that we are a smaller municipality, and like our previous delegate has spoken to, is that they need to see sort of a bang for their buck and that they're working for larger municipalities. I do appreciate the fact that they have reached back to us. And this was before the start of the pandemic, to say that we are willing to work with you. We are seeing that there are a lot of municipalities that are reaching out to us, because this is a new process for a lot of municipalities in the province right now. But your community or your municipality will first have to pass the bylaw in order for us to be able to review it and then put an agreement in place. So it's a huge factor to know that they will not work with us until council passes the bylaw.
So which communities have you been speaking with respect to Ms. Agnew was indicating that her partners throughout the communities are unable to verify or break down the report significantly. So which communities did she speak with regards to Airbnb?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The 2 municipalities that we are in communication with about their detailed practices are the City of Ottawa and the City of Waterloo.
Thank you. If I may have the committee's indulgence, a follow-up to the councillor's last question. Would it not be one option because in the recommendation, we're asking for a review and a report in 1 year's time, having used the Canadian-based LTAS to get this up and running, would it not be an option at that time? Could we not use that year to continue once the bylaw is passed, then Airbnb can look at it, and then we can actually have something tangible back from them? Could we not add something in there at review to further information received from Airbnb regarding their ability to perform that function? And because it's clear it's all speculative before we pass the bylaw. And if we continue here at committee, we'll never pass the bylaw. Is that not, is that a viable option to have that as part of the report in 1 year?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly staff would be happy to continue communication with Airbnb through this process. If that's council's direction, we'd be happy to do that and provide any additional information we're able to obtain in the report that we have committed to bringing back from a year from the time that the bylaw is implemented.
Thank you. I see Councillor Holland.
I have another question. Do I not get another question?
You know what, Councillor Spelt, we'll do a second round. We'll go 2 questions each and we'll come around again. Go ahead, Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Yeah, I just been in touch with a host in the district I represent who was asking, so most of this is a question on his behalf, about whether or not there would be an opportunity to have a conversation with Hamari and hosts, whether that could happen as a 3-way discussion with the city prior to a full vote at council on a bylaw.
Who from staff would like to field that question?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Through your chair, yeah, I wouldn't see a problem with that. We do have representation from Hamari with us tonight, but we would be more than willing to do those discussions with Hamari and with public stakeholders as well.
Thank you.
Question to the clerk, a procedural question. What interaction is permitted between members of the committee and the representatives from Hamari who are apparently participants at this meeting?
Mr. Chair, I believe that Hamari is acting as a consultant or in conjunction with the city on this matter. So therefore, basically their extension of staff. So it would be appropriate to ask questions of the consultant regarding these concerns and matters.
Okay, so I guess a framing question for the consultant from me, and that would be to the point from Ms. Agnew that there are 5 different platforms operating that we know of in the city at the moment. How would the platform that your company is developing deal with that multitude, not just Airbnb, but all 5 of these platforms?
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Adamer is with us from.
Yes. So, and should I repeat my question? Yes. So when you're ready to answer, you press unmute so we can hear you. The question is, how is your platform going to deal with the 5 or more different software platforms that hosts are currently using in the city, other Airbnb and the others, and how important is it to have one central platform to be able to do this? You need to press unmute.
Telephone mute, not the Zoom mute.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Testing. Okay, yes, I was on a telephone mute and not Zoom mute. Apologies there. Okay. So to answer the question, I'm Alan Adamer, founder, CEO, and principal engineer of LTAS. We've been in business almost 10 years now. The short-term rental aspect of our business relates to municipalities and how we provide and help municipalities to regulate this new industry. So Hamari starts off with crawling 60 different short-term rental websites. The vast majority of them are actually affiliates or aggregators of the big 4 that I referred to, that were referred to a little bit already. Airbnb, vrbo.com, which is owned by Expedia, the Flipkey and TripAdvisor, which is owned by the TripAdvisor conglomerate, as well as booking.com. So these are huge multinational corporations that basically control the inventory of short-term rentals. And if anybody wants to attract tourists and guests to their rental property, they're probably going to be using these major platform sites. Now, there are other websites that could happen to list these rental pages such as Kijiji or Craigslist, or even Facebook Marketplace is also in the game now. And it's an ever-changing landscape. So Harmari brings the technical expertise and experience of doing the online investigation and crawling services to help bridge the gap between what is being advertised in the short-term rental marketplace and what the city needs to enforce the rules. So Harmari could assist by first identifying where so we're going to crawl the websites. We also deduplicate. So if somebody's posting an Airbnb or a VRBO or a flip key and it's the same house, we're not going to send 3 letters. We're going to send 1 letter. Actually, it's not us sending letters. I apologize. We're just going to provide the names and the addresses of the operators. We will provide at least 2 pieces of supporting evidence to prove that such and such person is renting such and such property. For those that were not fully aware, Airbnb only gives you a little radius of 500 meters, approximate location of the property, and basically just the first name of the host. It's the only after booking will the full information be disclosed to the guests. So Harmari helps bridge that gap. We also help facilitate the MAT tax collection. From what I understand from the city, everybody's going to register through cityofkingston.org, and we will be provided that registry. And then we will be sending quarterly reminders to collect and remit the MAT tax. We would be working with the finance department to support whatever payment methods they recommend. And we would help with the tax reporting. I just have a few bullet points that I was just jotting down while Mr. Khan and Mr. Hartling were talking. Nobody's discussed the phenomenon of off-platform booking. And it's very important when we're talking about a VCA with Airbnb. Off-platform booking has to do with, okay, suppose I book a site, book a short-term rental. Now I pull up to the property and I meet the host face-to-face, and I have the keys. And then, I have to return the keys when I leave. And then the host is going to say, how was your stay? I say, great, I'm going to come back next summer. Well, if you're going to come back next summer, here's my cell number, and you can book off platform anytime and just pay cash. So guess what? Airbnb doesn't see a dime of that money next summer. That's called off-platform booking. And so to ensure a truly level playing field, Harmari provides analytics to show when the property shows on the calendar as unavailable versus available. And that can help with revenue modeling and estimation that would otherwise not be available. And again, to be crystal clear, Airbnb doesn't see any of that money. It's cash. So that's one point I wanted to address here. The Airbnb voluntary collection. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, guys. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you know what? That's good for now, Mr. Adamer. It's very, very illustrative. Thank you. As we go along, we may have further questions. Does anyone else from I know Councillor Spell wants to ask another question.
Mr. Chair, I believe Mr. Compo had a supplemental response to the.
Mr. Compo, did you have something to say about my question?
Thank you, through your chair. I just wanted to add also, it is very important to note that this is public information that the Harmari platform scrapes. This is not, they're not going into information or seeking information that is confidential. This is all public. And in terms of the previous delegations from Mr. Hartling, there's no surprise visits. There's no enforcement that will just come into your dwelling unexpectedly. We work with property owners. This whole implementation of enforcement process is based on education and awareness. So I really want to make that point.
Thank you. So unless Councillor Holland, you have another question, we'll go, Councillor McLaren, you'll have a chance to ask a question. We'll go back to the second round now. Questions only to staff or to the consultant. Councillor Chappelle, you're up first. Yeah, go ahead.
I just lost my screen trying to balance between two. If you can come back to me, that'd be appreciated.
Okay. So maybe I'll take this moment just to, we'll do a time check. It's almost 7 o'clock. There's at least one other member of the committee who has another commitment coming up shortly. And if that happens, we'll lose quorum. So we should move to the business item, get it on the floor, and then we can deal with it in what we see fit. Otherwise, we will lose the meeting at the briefing point, and we'll make no progress. Councilor Chappelle, did you remember your question?
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, perfect. Through your chair, I guess, you know, this is all very interesting to hire a company to do the screening and what have you. But I think what was presented tonight is we have, 85% or more working with Airbnb. There's an opportunity here to look at the costs of this system that's being proposed, the extra staffing that's required. I don't see a cost benefit analysis that shows me the different objective.
Point of order, Councillor Holland.
What's the question? It's a question. So I want to know how can we have.
She's saying.
Just asking about the question.
Yeah, you read my mind. Go ahead and ask your question, Councillor Chappelle.
So if we have, how come we haven't seen a cost benefit analysis that would look at the cost of free collection for 85% of these hosts versus this convoluted process is being proposed?
Okay, staff, what's your response?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the actual cost, we're looking at a fairly small cost related to the technology components that we're recommending through Homari, and those are to be funded through existing envelopes of money that's already been approved by council. So we're not asking for any additional funds at this time. In terms of the staffing complement in the mat collection specifically, we evaluated that from an overall business perspective before bringing this recommendation to you this evening. As you may recall, previously we were recommending that CAP collect this portion of the mat on behalf of the municipality, similar to what they're doing now for larger operators. And we evaluated that against our own staff complement, and working with Mr. Walker in taxation, we feel confident that we're able to deliver the service that is required associated with individual licensing for the operators, as well as the mat collection with the existing staff complement that we have available to us at this point in time.
Question, Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. This is from a constituent asking about the Harmony rep. He wants to know by what means do they calculate and how often and at what rates the property are booked. And he asks this because there are many different reasons that it could be unavailable other than that it's being booked offline.
Question to the consultant about the specifics of the unavailable data that you collect.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, my camera is disabled. So regarding calendar unavailable dates, yes, of course, there is the possibility of a calendar being unavailable due to a personal use of the property, i.e. a non-revenue generating stay, and also the possibility of a last minute cancellation. So yes, it is possible that using a calendar-based revenue modeling may overshoot on estimated revenues. And of course, prices on nightly stays may vary from peak to off-peak seasons. That's, of course, revenue modeling is modeling and estimation, and that's what it is. And of course, city staff will take that with a grain of salt. We don't want to say the numbers are cast in stone. We also have a review-based model as well, which looks at past reviews and estimates revenue modeling by nightly stay times minimum nights times the reviews. But reviews also underestimate revenue because not every stay corresponds to a review being placed by the guest. So I believe there's just a thumb in the wind where the Airbnb CEO said 50 to 75% of properties guests' stay end up being reviewed. So there's a modeling that needs to happen, and of course, I'm pretty sure it would only be dealt with in an egregious circumstance of underreporting if the city elects to use that data in that fashion. Hope that answers the question.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I believe Ms. Agnew had a supplemental response.
Staff would also like to answer that question.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, just in addition, the one thing I wanted to highlight for the committee in case it hasn't been totally clear, the platform that we've developed with, that we're suggesting we develop with Hamari and implement for the MAT collection, it's a self-remittance tool. So the STR operator logs on to a form. It's some very basic questions. You're specifying the period of time that you're remitting the tax for. They implement into the spreadsheet or to the online form the number of days, which calculates the 4%, the number of days and the rate. So it's actually the operator that is controlling the input of the information. What we receive from Hamari in the background that Mr. Adamer spoke about, it does help us with the auditing. So we're able to see volumes. And if we see MAT payments coming in that seem very low or unusual, we have the ability to utilize some of that information from an auditing perspective. But again, we've created a platform based on the feedback from operators that they wanted something that they would be in control of remitting that information, as opposed to that information being extracted and calculating a total that they'd be responsible for paying. So it's an important distinction that I wanted to make sure that the committee understood.
Thank you. So with the committee's indulgence, once it's moved and seconded, questions to staff are still in order, but we need to get the item on the floor so we can deal with it. Council sent it to us for recommendation and staff has prepared one, but we can amend it or take more time with it, whatever we want to do. So we need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. My apologies for interrupting. Traditionally, when we get the item under deliberation for business, we give consideration to comments from the public.
Yeah, but that is after it's moved and seconded, correct?
Typically, that occurs before that. Once it's moved and seconded, it's reserved for deliberation.
Okay, so following procedure, the item is, we now move to the business item. We're done with the briefing. It's confusing because it's redundant in the sense that members of the public cannot speak to the briefing, but they can speak to the business item. So the business item, 7A, is the only business item here. Questions from members of the committee come first, and then questions or comments from members of the public. Each member of the public gets one opportunity to speak. But first we go to members of the committee. We've just had a chance with the briefing, but if you have any questions, it is in order at this time. Keep in mind that we may lose quorum at any minute. Seeing none, we'll go to members of the public for comments or questions.
Please go ahead, Alexander.
Hi, I'll make just a very quick comment in regard to what Councillor McLaren was saying, and based on the response from Harami. It sounds like the Airbnb option, Airbnb obviously has internal data on exact nights booked. So they would have precise information to tell you exactly how many nights were booked and calculate the MAT tax exactly, versus Harami's option. They model based on what they see of your publicly available calendar. But I know myself, I'll book off my calendar for a full month if I go away. To Harami, that would look like I have my unit booked for a full month. So their estimates wouldn't even be close in terms of calculating the MAT. So their option, you got to pay for it. It's not automatic and it's imprecise. Airbnb doing it, it's exact, it's precise, and it's automatic. I'll let you guys go. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Mr. Lignini, I think.
Yeah.
Are there any other members of, all members of the public speak, and if there's any questions to staff, they deal with them at the end of the public section. Any other members of the public wish to speak?
Hello.
Miss.
Yes. Hi, thank you. It's Crystal Leclerc calling from Kingston Accommodation Partners. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you, as well as the staff who put a lot of time and effort into this. And I just, in reviewing it, I think that they've certainly been flexible and checked off a lot of points. The one piece that wasn't really brought up tonight was the consideration for all of those that aren't coming forward. So we have 100 STRs that are really engaged and involved, which is fantastic, but there are so many out there that we don't know about. And I think that's kind of been the missing piece. I really like the conversations we've had with Harmari. I think the self-remittance is what's been asked for. But yeah, that is an outstanding concern that I have about just working with a group like Airbnb only would be all of the ones that we can't identify. But that being said, again, thank you very much for all of your time and consideration and that of staff.
Thank you, Ms. Leclerc. I see a hand from Mr. Paul Miller. Mr. Miller, go ahead. You may have been double muted. Try it again.
Hi there. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Claire Miller. Paul Miller is my husband, and we let out our private residence on a part-time basis as an Airbnb. And my question is, in all the conversations that you've had with Airbnb, was there any inference that they would raise the costs to hosts in order to introduce this new level platform of accounting to the city? Because I can't imagine that they're going to include that in all the accounting that they have to do for nothing. And are they going to pass that on to the hosts? So we're going to get double whacked, as it were.
Okay, that's a question to staff. Thank you. All questions will be answered in sequence once all members of the public have had a chance to speak. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? I see 3 more hands. First up is Simon Andrew. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the data collection by Harmari. I don't know if anyone's watched this year's Massey lectures about data collection and all the implications of these sort of spy companies, for want of a better word, is they collect publicly available data, but they kind of weaponize it in terms of amalgamating it to find lots of information about someone. The other issue I have is Harmari can always be sold to a foreign country, a foreign company. It's, there's nothing to stop the owners of Harmari selling it. It could be sold to an American company at any point. It could become a subsidiary of a Chinese company. They say the data is all available in the public domain, but there's data that all of us here, including the councillors here, have in a public domain. And I can find out maybe very specific things about you that you would rather not know. And I think it's, number one, treating us like we're criminals. Number two, the optics of the council using this against Kingston citizens is not good at all. I mean, why aren't we spying on hotels? Why aren't we spying on any other organization that has to remit money to Kingston? Why are we being singled out as people that deserve special treatment? And the fact that, the guy from Harmari sort of points out that, it's very complicated. Is this, and this, there's this platform, this can happen. Well, I would like councillors to put up their hands if they've ever rented their home to some friends while they were away or something. Obviously, MAT tax should be submitted on that. But the reality is 85% of all short-term rentals in Kingston can have their MAT tax collected directly from Airbnb in a fail-proof method that we all agree to use and pay. Airbnb has assured us that it's no cost to us. They're doing this for the city as far as I'm aware, just as a service. And I think it's just really, really unfortunate that the city should consider using these tactics against citizens. None of us like being spied on. Okay, it's in the public domain. But okay, that's not the point. I mean, there's so many violations of sort of potential privacy in the future. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years' time, 20 years' time. Where is that data going to end up? We need control of our data. We don't want to give it to another party to decide how they're going to sell it or sub-sell it to other organizations. I would recommend that before anyone in the council goes ahead and votes on this, they actually listen to this year's Massey lectures, and they will immediately see what implications there are for using a company like Hamari. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Next up is Wilma Drake. Go ahead, Ms. Drake.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I would just like to add, Mr. Hamari confirmed all of my worst fears. He speaks of crawling through websites to figure out who we are, looking at our calendars, going off on a tangent about off-site bookings, and very, very concerning to me. My main question and point is, if Airbnb is waiting for a bylaw to collect the tax, rewrite the bylaw that requires Airbnb to collect the tax. As simple as that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Now, the next up, and I'm assuming this is in order, Mr. Clerk, would be Heather Ramsey.
Okay, hi. Yeah, what we've heard tonight, especially from Harmari, is really very concerning for all of us. I think the councillors should all be concerned that a company is going to be crawling the Airbnb websites and other websites looking for us. No wonder we feel like we're being treated like criminals, because that's exactly the way we've been treated. I think if the staff had taken a conciliatory attitude, that they would work with us right from the beginning, and that we would be on the honor system, or at least Airbnb collecting the MAT tax, the simplest thing to do, we would have all been paying tax long ago. But since the staff and to some extent the councillors have taken this attitude, is it not better to have people compliant because they want to be compliant, not because they're afraid that they're going to, their confidential information? I want to say one thing, that there was definite misinformation given by Kyle Compo. He knows better. He should not have said this, but our information is confidential. It is not public. So Harmari is going to be getting our confidential information in very creepy ways. That's all. That's what I can say. So why not set up a deal with Airbnb to collect the MAT tax? You're not intending to really have people compliant until June 1st of next year. That will give plenty of time for Airbnb to be involved in starting to collect the MAT tax, and we can all go on, happily ever after. And the staff should not be taking the attitude that it has for almost a year and a half. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Before we go to the next speaker, it is 7:15. One of the committee members had informed me earlier that that was as long as he could stay. If we lose quorum, if we lose one more committee member, the meeting ends immediately. Hopefully that doesn't happen before all members of the public have spoken. If that does happen, this item comes to our next committee meeting and we carry on where we left off. Next speaker is Suzanne Reed.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for meeting with us tonight, and thank you for giving us all an opportunity to speak. I am wondering, my question is, has City Hall considered people such as myself who are taking in the occasional guest just to keep our homes, just to not have to lose our homes? there are people such as myself who, for personal reasons, have not been able to work. I personally have not gone on disability. I will not collect OW. I will not collect insurance. I am trying to get by the best I can in a proper manner as a citizen. And if this goes through, I cannot honestly say that I am going to be staying with Airbnb, because I will not be able to. And especially after hearing about how Hamari is going to conduct their business. It does not give me much confidence that my other personal information will not be accessible to them, and I just cannot continue in good conscience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. We'll continue on with our speakers list. Next up is Donna Radke.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. And as everybody else has said, I appreciate the time that the city and everybody else has put into this issue. I'm going to make one point that I haven't heard anybody else make, which is that I'm insulted by the idea that I'm not going to pay a tax. I rent both on Airbnb, and I have for more than 8 years. I occasionally rent what they call off-platform to repeat guests who come back the next year. They pay me online, and I declare it on my taxes, and I pay the income tax on it. And there's no reason in the world that I wouldn't be declaring the MAT tax for those people. To intimate that that wouldn't be the case is just wrong. And the fact that everybody that I know in Airbnb completely supports the 4% tax makes me think that they will probably act much as I do. So that's really the only point I wanted to make, and I just hadn't heard it before. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Radke. Next speaker is Brenda O'Neill.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hi, thank you, Councillor Stroud. Adding to Simon's question, it raises the question about other businesses that are also using their homes as home-based businesses, such as daycare, babysitting. Are those businesses under such scrutiny as we are, under such surveillance as we are as short-term rental hosts? And like the previous speaker, I'm sorry, I forget her name. This is my home, and it is offsetting. I work full-time, and I've brought in a lot of business, as you can say, to Kingston, people looking for businesses and homes, etc. But I'd like to know what other businesses are under such scrutiny as we are, such as home daycare centers, etc. Do you have an answer for that?
Yes, that's an excellent question, which staff will respond to after all members of the public have had a chance to speak. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, we lost quorum.
Okay, so that's it. The meeting is no longer legal because we don't have quorum. So Mr. Clerk, what is the procedure? This item returns on December 10th?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will list this item on the December 10th agenda in some manner. I'm not sure exactly where it will go in order, but.
Yeah, so to the members of the public who are still watching, this item continues exactly at this point on December 10th with the same committee. as long as we have quorum, of course. We were at the members of the public section, and we will get staff's response. If there are any more members of the public that wish to speak at that time, they will have the opportunity as long as they did not already speak. Clerk has been taking detailed notes of each speaker and has staff, and staff will respond to any questions, concerns that were brought forward. And that will be the beginning of this item when it comes back to committee. There are no other items. We cannot deliberate motions. All I can do is adjourn the meeting for loss of quorum. I'm sorry about that. Goodbye, everyone.